Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Scott Shute. He comes from a LinkedIn background. He was an executive working with global operations. I'll let him explain what all he did. But he has an interesting perspective of working on bringing mindfulness to the workplace. He created that for LinkedIn. And now he's really looking at how do you bring these ancient traditions into the workplace? And my goodness, we need that today. So, Scott, please tell us a little bit about your journey. What brought you to what you're currently doing and why LinkedIn in terms of their picking this up?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And hi, everybody. It's good to be here with you. I have kind of two parts to me. Like I'm kind of a double agent. On the one hand, I've been an executive. I ran global customer operations at LinkedIn. It was a big team, 1,000 people. But on the other hand, I've had a practice, a meditation or contemplation practice since I was 13. I've been teaching since I was in college. It's been a huge part of my life, but one that I never really shared at work until the last decade or so. I was at LinkedIn. And I noticed our CEO was talking about his own practice. He was talking about compassion in the workplace. And I thought, wow, maybe this is a place where I could bring my own practice. And long story short, after getting over my own ego and my own fear and all that nonsense, I led my first session. And by session, I mean a meditation practice at work. And that first time, there was one person there, me and this other guy. And I'm sure he was just as terrified as I was because I never saw him again. But it grew and grew, and finally became a regular thing. And then people knew that I did it and I would get invited to bigger events. The CFO would have an offsite with, 300 or 400 finance people and invite me to kick it off with a meditation. And I volunteered to create a mindfulness program at the company. And we did, myself and a bunch of other volunteers. And for me, the tipping point was about 4 years ago. Our CEO at the time, Jeff Weiner, gave the commencement address at Wharton. And at Wharton, remember Wharton, very buttoned down place, he talked about compassion. And he said, essentially, if you're going to be successful in life, successful at work, be compassionate. And this was, quite a surprising topic, I think, for Wharton. And the next day he's on TV, he's on the morning news. And this is all the reporters want to talk about is compassion in business. And I was thinking, okay, it's time. It's time for me to do something different because I'd been in this ops role for a long time. But it's time for LinkedIn because essentially our CEO was telling, at the time, 12 or 15,000 employees that compassion was the most important thing that they could do. But what were we really doing about it? So I pitched the idea to Jeff, and together we created this role, head of mindfulness and compassion programs, where my vision still to this day is to change work from the inside out. And the mission is to mainstream mindfulness and operationalize compassion. And I did that role for a few years. And then my COVID project was to write a book. And now I'm out in the world helping other companies and helping us all change work from the inside out.
So, Scott, when you talk about that, I think it's so timely because I have never seen so much hunger in people for connection. There's something that happened in COVID that people have come back feeling a missingness. There's something
That's
missing
right.
that they want filled.
That's
And so doing something from that inside out, I think, is really important. But how do you do that?
Sure. Well, maybe just a little more context first, because I do think you're right about this timing. On the one hand, companies have never had more power in the world, right? Companies are shaping our consciousness and shaping our behaviors in ways that governments and religions have been doing for thousands of years. And so when we think about how do we change the world, I think companies can change the world in a very dramatic way. And then inside of companies, over the last, 100 years, workers have gained more power, especially in the white collar space, right? Because many companies realize they don't have even manufacturing lines. A lot of the companies in the IT world and the information age only have data as an asset. And so they realize that employees are the biggest benefit, or sorry, not benefit. Employees are the most valuable resource that companies have. And so we're in this space where you combine all of that timing with COVID, with this, we're in the middle of the great reshuffle or the great waking up, where so many people, when given the opportunity to pause, they're saying, you know what? I want more. I want more from my experience of working. They want more connection. They want more meaning in their lives, in their work. 9 out of 10 Americans say that they would work for less money to have more purpose in the work that they do. They're leaving bad managers and they're leaving not great cultures to go to managers that care about them, to go to cultures that care about them and will treat them with respect. Everybody just wants to do their best work and be in an environment where they can. So that's the context. All right. So then the how, right? I think I divide my work into 2 parts. There's mindfulness and compassion. The mindfulness piece is really another way of saying developing ourselves, developing our self-awareness. And then compassion, because we don't work or live in isolation, we work and live with other people. This is everything we do. It's what we do in business. How do we develop products, thinking about our customers? How do we sell to them or service them, thinking about them? And when the research shows that when companies are really balancing the needs of all of their stakeholders, including their shareholders, but also their employees and their customers, these are actually the companies who are more successful. They make more money. So at the root of this, when we take care of everybody instead of just taking care of ourselves, all of us benefit.
So let's just step back for a moment. I need to operationalize and be somewhat pragmatic in terms of, okay, so let's say I'm company A.
Yep.
And I am a manufacturing company, and I want to put mindfulness in, have it be integral to my organization. How do I go about doing that?
Sure. Well, I think often it starts from a grassroots level. So there are different things that we can do. So there are things in the mental well-being space, like straight up meditation sessions. And so it could be meditation or that sort of thing. As an example, live sessions like I was doing, or giving people access to an app like Insight Timer or Headspace or Calm and encouraging them to use it. These are the programs. But what's really important from an employee well-being perspective is that we create an environment where the employees know that leadership cares about them, right? So as the leaders are talking about the company, instead of just talking about how much money we're making and what the next widget is we're building, we're also talking about the care and feeding of the employees as well. I read a great quote today, which I love. It's something like, your customers won't fall in love with your company until your employees do. When your employees fall in love with the company, then your customers, they will build the things that your customers love as well. So yes, we can put these programs in place, but unless we build the environment, and this is where compassion comes in, unless we build the environment that is humane, an environment which balances the needs of the employees with the needs of the customers and the shareholders, then it has a hard time of being really successful.
Can we just spend a moment talking about what is compassion?
Sure.
Because I see that as being part of the human potential. It's part of that whole sense of non-judgment, accepting people for who they are. I also see what people are reacting to right now is a sense of a lot of judgment going on. You can't say that. You can't. Well, I can't give my opinion because it may not be today's correct word, or,
Mm.
and the list goes on as to
Sure.
what people are reacting to.
Sure.
So in
There are
that world, what is compassion?
So for me, there's a lot of good definitions. I like this one. For me, it's about first capacity, because our capacity for compassion ebbs and flows. Capacity for three things. The first is awareness of another person, awareness of others. The second one is having a mindset of kindness towards them. And the third is the courage to take action. So in what you're describing, we live in a world that is incredibly divided. And so I start with, okay, do I have awareness of them? One of my favorite quotes is from Abraham Lincoln, 16th president of the United States during the Civil War, which was extremely divided times. He says, "I do not like that man. I must get to know him better," which is some incredible wisdom, because what he knows to be true is that once we are aware of others and we start to see the totality of them and not just the issue that we might disagree on, we can see that probably 97, 98% of them is very similar to 97 or 98% of us. Just like the pothole, we typically focus on the one thing that's different or one thing that's wrong instead of the 99% that's right. So that's the first one, awareness. The second one is a mindset of kindness, right? Instead of jumping all over each other for everything that we say, it's giving the other person some slack. And it's really trying to understand them and see them as humans, see them as same or similar to us. And the third part is the courage to take action. In some cases, that's the courage to take no action. The courage to bite my lip and to ask 3 more questions before I, share my own opinion. But for me, this is what compassion is. It's not, what I'd say is one of the misconceptions about compassion is some people feel that it's soft. I guarantee you, if you ever tried to implement these things, it takes extraordinary strength to be a compassionate leader, extraordinary bravery to be a compassionate leader in today's world.
So can you be a compassionate leader, Scott, if your organization isn't compassionate, if you don't have a culture of compassion?
Absolutely. Just like we can be, just like in an environment which is incredibly divided, we can live in peace and we can be a peaceful person. We can be somebody who, understands the world and makes it a better place. Of course, we can operate like this. Now, if we find ourselves acting compassionately and continually running up against a structure which makes that challenging, then at some point we are also free to vote with our feet, But absolutely, I think this is why I talk about changing work from the inside out. It starts with us, each one of us. We can't wait for our organization to become compassionate. We become compassionate, and eventually the people we lead and the people around us will see that this is a better way. And then the organization becomes compassionate in some cases.
So, Scott, that takes somebody in an organization, probably more than one person, to decide that they're going to do something a little bit differently. Yeah. And in some ways, we were talking a bit back about how one of the things that people are wanting to really address or have people respect, pay attention to, is, do I get purpose and meaning out of my work? Mm-hmm. And so even that, putting purpose and meaning into one's work, how do you help people do that at their work?
I start at the highest level if they haven't already crafted their vision and mission statement. And we talk about the biggest impact that company has on the world. And there are some really good mission statements and vision statements out there, As an example, IKEA's is to make, I'll paraphrase, I might not get it quite right, but they make furniture, right? So what would they say? And they basically say they want to make life better for the many people. It's places like that, things like that. So then we bring it on down. So at the team level, at the individual level, how does my work help influence this bigger change the world moment? And if I can connect the dots between my work as an individual finance person or engineer, or marketer, HR business partner, then I can connect the dots to this higher level meaning. And then it gives me more opportunity to really internalize how my work has meaning or my life has meaning. But beyond that, beyond the connection to the company goals, there's the work and meaning that I have every day. So as an example, I used to lead customer service, right? And I was visiting a team, one of my teams in the Midwest, and we were walking the halls, and I was talking to this young woman, and she had a sticky note on her monitor that said "Grandma." And I was just kind of looking at it because it was a very prominent, on her monitor, and I just asked her about it. And she didn't really want to talk about it first, but then she did. She said, "Okay, look, here's the deal. This job can be very challenging sometimes because every day I'm dealing with 40 or 50 or 70 customer inquiries, customer cases every day. And they're not calling to say how much they love me or love us and our product. They're complaining. And that can get me down. And sometimes I don't respond in the way that I would like to. I can get monotonous or robotic. And it's just not who I want to be. And so I think about my grandma, and I love my grandma so much that if my grandma were to call or email or chat, I would treat her with so much respect and care. I would have so much patience for her, and I would be happy to do it. I would be happy at the end of each phone call to be able to be of service like that. And so when I start feeling that way, or even before every call or chat, I'll think about my grandma, and then I'll deal with the next customer. And for me, this is the root of it. Regardless of what's going on in our worlds or our companies, we can be that light that does the right thing. And in doing so, we help ourselves.
So what you're talking about is that sense, individual responsibility, right? Don't wait for the organization to
Absolutely.
bring it to you. You bring it to the organization.
That's right. Yeah, I love the saying, like, if you're looking for a helping hand, don't look any further than the end of your wrist. Or look at the end of your wrist, I guess. It's right there. Help yourself first.
Yeah. And I think what's important about that, Scott, is when it comes to purpose, for example, what's my purpose or being able to live out my purpose at work? If a company has 1,000 people, you have 1,000 purposes, right? A company can't embrace all of those if there's individual nuances that are different. But you can yourself bring your own purpose and put it into the context of what you're doing.
Sure.
Right.
Well, I do think that the company primarily should be talking about the company's purpose and getting people enrolled and excited about that purpose, right? And then on top of that, we can layer in our own individual purposes.
Got it.
But hopefully the company, just like IKEA is not talking about building the best furniture in the world or having the most market share for, blah, blah, blah. They're talking about making the world a better place for the many people. So that idea is central behind everything they do, from sourcing materials to sales to marketing a new product to building something. And I think that's at the root of what every company can do, because every company should be doing something that's valuable for the world. If they're not, then probably hard to attract people.
So let me ask you, I mean, it's a wonderful concept, right? And I think it's what people are wanting. I think companies that embrace it are going to be the ones who emerge doing well. But in the process of that, what are your challenges? What makes it hard for you to help a company look at that moving from the inside out?
Sure. I think part of it is habit and our belief systems. So the research shows, the straight up research shows that companies who act this way, who balance the needs of their stakeholders, are 14 times more profitable, 1,400% more profitable than the S&P average. So the science already says it's better for you. Why don't we do it?
1,400%, did you say?
1,400% more profitable. Yeah, 14 times more profitable. It's kind of like individuals, the science shows that if we eat the right foods, we're healthier. Or if we get the right exercise, we're healthier. Or if we spend time meditating or prayer or contemplation, we're happier. But then we often don't do those things. We often don't eat the right foods or spend that time. And so there's a difference between knowing and doing. And in the work environment, we've been taught this belief system that, in the 80s, we were talking about greed is good. Remember the Gordon Gekko character from Wall Street, the movie Wall Street. Or, we use the language of war. The art of war is cited. We use war language. We're going to destroy our competition, things like that. And so to have this other language that says, actually, the way for us to win is to help all of the people who are involved with us, our employees, our customers, and our shareholders, is just a different way of thinking. And so it takes time for some people to embrace it. And so I always like to start with stories. So as an example, in somebody's personal relationships, right? If we're taught to win, all right, fine. Well, think about your most dear relationship, your spouse or your kid or your parent. If you focused on getting 100% of what you wanted every time with that other person, is that the path to happiness? And the answer for people who are self-aware is, of course not, because I realize over time it's a balance. About half the time I get what I want, and about half the time the other person gets what they want, and we work and we figure out a compromise, and we learn a lot in the middle. And in the same way, it works like this in business too. When we really care deeply about our customers and we're really trying to solve their problems, when we really care deeply about our employees and we're trying to create a place that's the best place for them to work, and we really care deeply about our shareholders, we want to provide, a strong valuation and return for them, and we solve for a balance of those three things, it's going to go better for all of us, for all three things.
So you have a program working with organizations to help them put mindfulness into the company, to have this be really a strategic part of how their company operates, correct?
Yes, I would say so. What I'm trying to do is build something for organizations that will easily help them scale these concepts. So perhaps beyond mindfulness, I would call it, conscious business. These concepts. How do you put these in concepts? And essentially, the idea is we've created something that's scalable. The idea is that nobody has time, so they're really snackable or bite-sized. And if you can get a manager and their team to commit to 20 minutes every other week for a quarter, then I believe they can make real change. And in that 20 minutes, it's related to the work that they do. We give a little bit of a concept, and then we give some scaffolding to help them get into the bones of it, so that it's not just another thing that they have to do, but it's something they're already doing, and they can do that thing even better. So we're trying to build something from the inside out that scales.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, sure. There's a variety of things. So a couple of them are how to get to know each other better. So one is we help people build a working with me guide. So it's a short 2 or 3 pager that's essentially, hey, here's an operating manual on how best to work with Scott. Here are my likes and dislikes, or here's a little bit of my background. Here's what I'm good at. Maybe here's what I'm, not as good at that I'm still working on. Here's what you can expect of me. Here's what I expect of you. Here's how I like to give and receive feedback. It's essentially, if you worked with somebody for 20 years, all the things that you'd learn about them by working with them for 20 years, we shortcut that process by building one of these. This is a really quick and easy way to get to know each other better. But then we get into the work. Once we know each other a little better, there's another practice I love, which we have done at LinkedIn, called the clean escalation, which is the opposite of, the clean resolution, which is the opposite of a dirty escalation. And in a dirty escalation, you imagine, Lois, if you're the manager, you have somebody in your office, person A, and they're maybe complaining about person B, and they're saying, on this big project, we should totally be headed in the left direction. And they're very passionate about it. And maybe sometime later, person B is in your office, and they're complaining about person A, and they're saying, on this big project, we should completely be headed in the right direction. Now, as a manager, who do we listen to? It's often whoever was loudest or most eloquent, or maybe who even was last, because we have a recency bias. And that's not a very good way to build a decision. And all of this is happening behind closed doors, so it's kind of like politicking. So instead, we replace that behavior. We replace it with the clean resolution. So first of all, a manager says, well, sorry, we can't have this meeting without this third person in the room. I want to hear everybody's perspective. And we encourage these two people, even before that, to work together to find the places where they agree, to find the places where they disagree, and come together to the decision maker so that the decision can be made in a better way out in the open, but also in a less political way, in a way that leaves us all feeling whole and good because we were part of the process. So these are just a couple of the types of things that we do. I think of it as my greatest hits from being a leader and some of the greatest hits we've used in the culture within LinkedIn.
Wow. So when you did that LinkedIn, it's a big organization. You got a lot of people spread everywhere, right?
Sure.
What was the response? When you first started, what did people say? And then let's go into the next.
Sure. Well, a couple different flavors. So the things I just talked about are things that we would do at a corporate level and not necessarily led by me. We had other people who would, drive some of these concepts. And I would say that our levels of engagement are extraordinarily high at LinkedIn. It's consistently one of the best places to work in America. And culture, I think, is a huge part of that. The quality of leadership is a huge part of that. And so it's within that context that I created this role of mindfulness and compassion and started leading, programs like mindfulness, programs like workshops about compassion. And those were met, with an openness that perhaps might not exist at other places. Mm. And with things like mindfulness, I wouldn't expect everybody in the organization to take it up. Maybe 15 or 20% of the organization might come to a meditation class or a workshop on compassion or a workshop on building resilience. But these ideas of conscious business, these are things that 100% of our employees, are interested in and follow because this is the culture. Kind of going back to this place when I talk about companies have so much power on our behavior. First of all, LinkedIn only hires people who are going to fit into this culture. And if they don't fit into this culture, they're just not going to last very long. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's now one of the most senior leaders at LinkedIn. This is a long time ago. And we were talking about the previous cultures that we'd been in. And I was asking, what's it like for you, having come from kind of a consulting background? And he said, more than I'd like to admit, I'm pretty malleable. In other words, I kind of acted like everybody else acted in this other company, and I never really thought anything about it. But here at LinkedIn, when given the chance, I get to act as my best self. Mm-hmm. And I'm so much happier. I'm such a better person. I'm so much more creative. It's just such a better way to work. So the culture can definitely change the person, but also that person has always been in there. Right? So we can change individually. We can implement these conscious business practices ourselves, regardless of our surroundings.
Got it. Scott, our time is almost up. What have we missed that the audience should know that we haven't talked about?
Oh, good question. Well, let's see. I think that we've covered a lot of good territory. I love this idea of changing the world from the inside out. So everything from if you think of all the biggest problems, whether it's the environment or politics or the division or whatever it is, each one of us has a role to play, and it starts with us. One of my favorite quotes is from Rumi, who is a 14th century, perhaps 13th century poet. He said, "Yesterday I was clever and I tried to change the world. But today I am wise and I'm working on changing myself." And to me, that's the heart of what I'm talking about, is we can change the world, our world, from the inside out. And perhaps just one last thing, if just to stay in touch, if you want to reach out, feel free to reach out. I'm at scott@scottshute.com. You can find out more about me at my website, scottshute.com. And if you're interested in bringing these practices to your workplace or as a leader, just feel free to reach out. We can do lots of cool things together.
So thank you for that. And for those of you who are listening, that is quite an offer that Scott is giving. And it is what he does. It is what he's passionate about. It does bring to organizations. So I really encourage you to look for his information. It will be in the show notes for you so you can see how to contact him and make your place a better place to work. And we'll do that one person at a time, right, Scott?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Scott.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast, thank you for being with us. And be sure to look at the information about Scott and visit our website also at www.buildtomorrow.com with the number 2, and also www.startwithcollaboration.com. So thank you very much for being with us. And Scott, again, thank you.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.